welcome everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Corey Freeman. I am Phi Alpha Delta's Director of Communications. On behalf of the Executive Office, we really want to thank you all for attending tonight, this Military and Veterans Law panel, which is part of our awesome P.A.D. Founders Week programming. We are so excited to host this discussion tonight to honor Veterans Day. And as a representation of really P.A.D.'s core values, many of which cross over with the values of various military branches, including integrity, service, and courage, among others. I want to thank our panelists here today for taking the time to join us this evening and for all they each do for P.A.D. These women on this panel and moderator Nicole do so much for Phi Alpha Delta. They're great. I would also like to thank Nicole Winget, who's here, and introduce her for those of you who haven't had the pleasure of meeting her at a P.A.D. event or otherwise. Nicole is going to be moderating our discussion tonight. She is currently serving Phi Alpha Delta as the International Marshal on P.A.D.'s International Executive Board. She joined Phi Alpha Delta's Willis chapter at Ohio Northern University College of Law. Residing in Fayetteville, North Carolina, she is currently an active member of P.A.D.'s Triangle Area Alumni Chapter, which is based in North Carolina. Nicole is a prior criminal defense attorney and is currently a college professor at Campbell University. She is a lieutenant commander assigned to the Office of Naval Intelligence. She's also one of the most passionate people I've met in P.A.D., and I'm very excited to turn it over to her to lead you through this conversation about military and veteran law and military-related experiences. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Nicole.
Thank you very much, Corey, and thank you for all the work that you've done to put this together. And welcome, everybody. I'm very excited that we're having this panel. My initial plan was to read everybody's bio, but I don't want to steal everybody's thunder. So if the panelists don't mind, I'm just going to call you one by one if you'll introduce yourself, and then we'll go into our roundtable. So Samantha, you're first up on my screen. Would you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Major Samantha Sliney. I go by Sam, so please call me Sam. I am an active duty Air Force JAG. I have been in the Air Force for 7 years. I'm currently a defense counsel in the Air Force. I hail from Watkins chapter at the North Carolina Central University School of Law. I'm also stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina with Nicole, so we aren't far from one another. And we are both, I'm also active in the Triangle Area Alumni Chapter. I also was a member of Methodist University Pre-Law Chapter, so P.A.D. is very near and dear to my heart. I have held various positions in the organization. Currently, I'm on the disciplinary committee. I'm very excited to be here and to speak about my experience and answer your guys' questions.
Excellent, thank you. Jenny, you're next up on my screen.
Hi, y'all. I'm Jenny Tang. I am senior appellate litigation attorney at the largest law firm dedicated solely to veterans benefits in the country. And I hail from the University of Tennessee's Sanford chapter. And I served as District 23 Justice for 3 years, and that covers the chapters in Northern Virginia, Maryland, and DC, which is a total of 11 alumni and law school chapters. I'm very excited to be here. I am very, very passionate about my work, and I've got family members who have served in Army, Navy, Air Force, and every American conflict since World War II, so that's very close to my heart. And I'm not gonna, I don't tend to toot my own horn, so I'll pass it on to the next person.
Thank you very much. Kaylin, you're up next.
Hi, so I am Kaylin Pelletier-Koenig. Everybody just knows me as Kaylin Pelletier. So I hail from Madison chapter in Rhode Island. That's where I did my law school, and I was initiated into that chapter. And I currently serve as District 20 ADJ. I'm very, very fortunate to have both professional and personal connections to the military. So I serve as a staff attorney for a local nonprofit in Rhode Island. It's called Operation Stand on Rhode Island. We provide wraparound services to active duty military and veterans, everything from housing assistance, employment and training, basic needs, food pantry, clothing drive, to our newest program, which is actually the law program, which is what I do. I do many different types of law for them, the most common being Social Security, disability, evictions, and family. And then I'm very fortunate, please excuse my very big smiles, I'm also married to a service member who has actually been overseas in the Middle East since January. And as of an hour ago, it's not OPSEC, it's General Hill. Do not yell at me anymore. It is no longer OPSEC. He actually landed at Fort Bliss, Texas about an hour ago. He's officially back in the States. So yes, it's a very big day for me. So thank you.
Well, as someone who's been on both sides of deployments, I can very confidently say your position's the harder of the two positions. So congratulations for making it through it. And thank you for taking the time to be here tonight, which I'm sure you're very excited to reconnect. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, you smile as much as you want. That's amazing. Holly, would you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. My name is Holly Christian. As far as my military and veterans law background, I used to work at the American Bar Association, and I was the Veterans Pro Bono coordinator there, and also served as chief counsel to not only the coordinating committee on veterans benefits and services, but also the active duty kind of version of that committee, the Armed Forces Law Committee. And then also I currently serve, I was working at the ABA in Chicago, made the big move to the Bay Area in California. And so I currently serve as the pro bono manager as well as a staff attorney at a VSO, veteran service organization, called Swords to Plowshares. And we do a lot of the similar services that Kaylin does in Rhode Island. But our law practice is solely focused on VA benefits and military discharge upgrades, which are military records corrections. And I'm sure we'll get into that in a little bit. But as far as my P.A.D connections go, I was the District Justice of Northern Ohio, and Nicole was actually my predecessor before that. So I had a good mentorship there. And then when I moved to the Bay Area, became involved in the Bay Area Alumni Chapter, but of course, Story Chapter is where I call home forever and always, as Jenny Tang, I think, agrees here.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And last but certainly not least, Miss Kristen.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kristen Sample. I'm currently at Naval Air Station Pensacola in Pensacola, Florida, originally from the suburbs of Chicago. I went to law school at John Marshall, where I got involved with the Veterans Legal Clinic shortly after I married my husband. My husband's active duty. He's a captain in the Air Force. Currently, we're at NAS Pensacola because he's a instructor at the Combat Systems Officer School here. I don't know why it's on a Navy base, but it is. So I've kind of got the military spouse side only of the military aspect. I'm also involved with MSJDN, Military Spouse Judicial Network, for short, or Juris Doctorate Network for short. That's helping spouses of military members get licensing in multiple different states. Right now, we're up to 40 states that have some form of military spouse rule on the books. And I actually got to swear into Florida, which doesn't have reciprocity with anyone underneath that rule. So I kind of have some information about that too. But aside from that, I'm originally from Chicago, John Marshall Lincoln chapter. Then I was in New Mexico at Cannon for 3-ish years, give or take. And then now we're in Florida, and next year we're hoping to be in Texas. So
excellent. Thank you and welcome. So tonight we're going to do basically just a roundtable. I have a few questions for the panelists, and then we will open the floor to a Q&A as well. So start thinking of your questions. And the first question I want to get everybody's input on is, why did you get involved in the aspect of the military legal system that you are currently involved in? What attracted you to it? What drew you to it? And if somebody wants to speak up, go ahead. Otherwise, I'll pull a Professor Winget and call on you.
I'll go. So my husband's active duty Army. And when I was in law school, so we've been at Fort Bragg a long time. I thought he had a really cool job. His job is much, much cooler than mine at this point. But I thought that, like, oh, he gets to jump out of planes for a living. I want to do that. That sounds cool. So I interned at an Air Force base that used to be Pope Air Force Base, which was connected to Fort Bragg. It has now been subsumed by Fort Bragg. But intern there, it was absolutely, I had a blast. It was, I thought it was really cool that you got to get paid to work out. I thought it was cool that you could like go and hang around airplanes. Like, I don't get to jump out of them, even though I would really love to. I only get to do that if, people invite me to, just as a guest. But that's how I got into it. So I did other things in law school. That was my 1L internship. And honestly, it was just because I was interested in it and it was local, so I didn't have to pay for housing, and I got a pro bono stipend for the summer. So I was like, easy enough. Fell in love with it. I explored private practice and working for other government agencies as well. Being a dual military family is extremely, extremely difficult, especially if you're not in the same service. Thankfully, my family hasn't. We've only been separated once. And that was before we had kiddos, so that wasn't too bad. But yeah, applied to the Air Force, got in. It was my number one choice. It was first job to get back to me. So after that, I was like, whew, don't have anything else to worry about 3L year. I'm good. All I got to do is graduate, pass the bar. And yeah, I've loved it ever since. One of the other things that's important as well is I didn't really want to be bored. I was 24 when I graduated from law school. So I was really concerned that if I went to one area of the law and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do at that point, that I would be bored and get burnt out really quickly. So the JAG Corps was a way for me to kind of do a whole lot of different things, and it really changes day to day. And then I get reassigned to a new assignment every 2 years. So definitely no time to get bored for sure. So that's how I ended up where I am.
Excellent. Thank you. Who's up next? Holly?
Yeah, I can go. So although I do have two grandfathers that served, my connection was actually through an undergrad internship where I worked with former Supreme Court of Ohio Justice Evelyn Lundberg Stratton. And she was working with veterans who were involved in the veterans treatment courts in Ohio. And so I got to hear the stories and learn about kind of the plight of justice-involved veterans and just about veterans in totality. And I think that when we think about vulnerable populations, veterans don't automatically come to mind to a lot of civilians. But once I started listening to the stories of how hard it is for them to be discharged with good papers that allow them the benefits that they were promised when they enlisted, and how difficult it is, the fact that you have to have an accredited attorney help you with the VA process when these benefits are crucial and crucial to their well-being, and also the reason why they might have joined the military. I just kind of realized that this population had been really historically overpromised and underserved. And to be frank, excuse my language, but that really pissed me off. And I think it kind of lit a fire in my belly to do this kind of work, because I always say that if I can give back 10% of what they sacrificed so that I can be here today and do what I do, then I'll consider my life very successful. And so that's what got me interested in this work and keeps me going.
I love the passion. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart as a military member, it's so nice to see, and we appreciate it. Jenny, how did you get involved in the career path that you're in?
So I actually moved over to DC with my husband and was looking for a job in public service. And actually a fellow P.A.D member told me about an opening at VA's Board of Veterans Appeals back in 2012. So that was when it was, it's still difficult to use USA Jobs. And so this P.A.D member let me know of an opportunity to apply through the back door. And I joined the Board of Veterans Appeals, or BVA, and stayed there for about 5 years. At first, I just really wanted to give back and do public service work. But really, as I went on in my work, I realized really this is so much deeper. As an immigrant, I understand just how many privileges I have as a woman, as a person of color, and just to have the opportunity to be a lawyer in this country and to understand that these folks are folks who really protected those privileges and those freedoms. And it became more than just public service, became a moral obligation for me. And additionally, connecting to the members of my family who've served and who continue to serve now on active duty, it's just been really, I would say, an accidental, serendipitous occurrence that I ended up in this field. And after about 5 years of working at VA's Board of Veterans Appeals, practicing was essentially administrative law. So that is essentially making decisions on veterans appeals still within the VA system. I really wanted to do more. I felt as if, it was just one case at a time, and I really didn't have any autonomy or true autonomy to make decisions. If I wanted to really grant a veteran's claim, it would really be up to the veterans law judge to make that call. And I didn't want to deny claims that I wanted to grant. So I ended up switching over to the appellate litigation side. And so now I represent veterans and their families against VA before the federal U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, which is a Title I federal court that has exclusive jurisdiction over all veterans appeals coming from VA. So mostly it's compensation issues, but we also see pension. We also see, other things such as, mortgage stuff. I mean, there's so many different kinds of VA benefits out there. And so by representing these folks, not only am I able to converse with them, which, I mean, it's amazing just to hear the stories that each of these veterans have, but also actually have a difference in each of these lives and the lives of their families and, their survivors as well. And just to kind of switch over to the more like lawyer side of things, it's also an incredibly fulfilling job, not just because of the work that I'm doing, the people I'm serving, but also because the fact of the matter is that VA did not have any judicial review over their decisions for 100 years or so. And in 1988, they created the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, thereby finally allowing for judicial review of VA decisions, whereas before, what were they doing? So because the court is so new, appellate attorneys such as myself have the opportunity not only to win benefits, or at least help win benefits for veterans and their families, but also to establish precedent for thousands of veterans going forward, because the law is it's developing all the time. There's new cases, new precedent all the time. You, even as a first year appellate litigator, you have the opportunity to really create guidance, positive guidance for the agency that could help, I would say, millions of veterans going forward. So yeah, that's my story.
Outstanding. You guys are just motivating the heck out of me. I love it. Kristen, how did you get involved with the field that you're in now?
So I've done a whole bunch of different stuff. When I was in law school, I worked with the John Marshall Veterans Legal Clinic, which worked at the time, I'm not sure if it's what they still do, primarily in denied disability claims and getting them service connected and upgraded from not being connected or a minimal connection up to either fully connected or the next level if possible. So that was my first introduction into kind of veterans law. I really liked it. I want to get back to it, but with being connected to my active duty spouse, it's a little difficult when we bounce so many times. I mean, in 4 years, we've lived in 3 places. So that's tough. I was a public defender in New Mexico, which was great because you do see some of those kind of veterans cases. I got more exposed to them when I was a public defender here in Pensacola. We had one of those veterans treatments courts. So I worked side by side with that attorney a little bit. But then in December of last year, I went to a private law firm doing hurricane insurance defense. And then since October, I've been a stay-at-home mom. I had a baby in July. And COVID has prevented my 2 children from going back to daycare because they go to daycare on base. And the CDC or Children Development Center on base isn't taking new kids for my 3-month-old. And if you can work from home, they're asking you not bring your children for the one who had a spot. So until COVID settles down and I can get them both back into daycare, I'm a stay-at-home mom, but my focus has shifted from working into going more into the military spouse aspect and helping military spouses start to get their licensing. I'm part of the committee working in New Mexico right now to get a law on the books to help military spouses be able to wade into the New Mexico bar as opposed to having to sit for the bar.
Excellent. And thank you for that work too. As somebody who's worked with a lot of military spouses, it's a frustrating process and
Yes.
much needed work. So thank you. Some of you have heard one of my life mottos, which is Semper Gumby, always flexible. With the stories I'm hearing, 2020 is definitely testing that for all of us, I think. Kaylin, if you would speak to how you got into the field you're in, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was in college, I actually tried to enlist. So I tried to do the ROTC route and enlist in the Army. Unfortunately, I have a medical condition that makes me disqualified for service. So I went down that route. A waiver wasn't an option. For those that don't know the process, a lot of the times you can get waivers to get in anyway. And unfortunately, that wasn't an option for me. So they said, I'm sorry, but you can't serve. I said, oh, okay, I guess I'll figure something else out. And I kind of gave up on that for a few years. And then when I was in law school, I did an externship with the Legal Services Organization in Rhode Island Legal Services. It's kind of like the premier pro bono civil legal services in the state. And during that experience, during my 2 and 3L year, I was able to work with a few veterans. And I kind of started thinking, well, maybe I can't actually serve, but maybe that kind of I can, dedicate my career to working with veterans, working within, the services and working, with these people. Maybe that's my way of giving back. So I kind of tried to see the silver lining. I said, all right, you know what? I really like this. I realized that unfortunately our veterans, they come with a very unique set of circumstances. And I said, you know what, that's kind of what I want to do. So then I graduated and I got a job at a private law firm because that's all that was really hiring. And then the legal services organization that I was working for got an Equal Justice Works fellowship. And it was specifically to work in the Veterans Legal Corps. And they knew that I was interested and I had worked with them for almost a year. And they said, would you like to apply? We'd like you to apply. We think you'd be perfect for this. We know you've really wanted to work with this group of people. And that's kind of what started my journey. And they had teamed up with Operation Stand Down, where I currently work. And as I was working with the two organizations, I really fell in love with Operation Stand Down because anyone who works with veterans knows that usually their legal issues is like one of a million things they need, right? So you don't go to a neurologist for back pain plus headaches plus a liver disease plus a kidney disease plus a heart issue, right? So I liked Operation Stand Down because they provide holistic services. So we're not just going to give you a legal service and send you on your way, because that's going to fix one problem. I have never met a veteran that only has one problem. Right? They have like 10 most of the time. I see Holly shaking her head like, yeah. Unfortunately, they come with their unique set of issues and circumstances, and you can bandage them up and send them on their way fixing one problem, but that doesn't mean you're actually going to help them get back on their feet. So what Operation Stand Down does is we actually take a holistic approach. So they will come in at any point in the process, meet with one of our departments, and they said their viewpoint is, okay, well, we're not just going to focus on this one issue. We're going to see everything you need, and then we're going to take it on as a whole. We're going to take you on as a whole person, not just this one issue. So I could get a veteran for whatever their legal issue is, but I'm also making a referral to our employment and training department. We're going to find them a better job, get them out of the minimum wage job sector, get them on their feet. They might have a housing issue, so I'm going to refer them to our housing services. I'm going to see if they're eligible for, security deposit and rental assistance to help them get ahead. I'm also going to tell them they can use our food pantry. We have a social worker on staff now, so I might have them meet with a social worker a couple times to see if they need to be connected to the VA if they're not already for any mental health needs. We really try to help every single part of them as a person. So it's really me operating as a lawyer within the social services rather than a law firm, which I really, really like, because law firms are amazing, but they help with one thing and one thing only. operations stand down tries to help you with everything. And I'm just one piece of a whole puzzle. And I really, really like that. I like being able to say, you know what, I can help you with whatever your legal issue is, but I'm also going to make sure that we take care of your other needs as well and really put you in the best position possible to make a really nice life for yourself and get ahead, because I think they deserve that, right? That's the least we can do for them, is give them a little bit of our services and our time and really listen to them and help them as a whole person, not just this one piece of them that's having an issue. And that's how I ended up where I am. And here we are.
Excellent. Thank you. And Holly, you put something in the chat, so I'm going to call on you next for this one. And I may be stealing your thunder, but you mentioned that Equal Justice Works, and Kaylin just mentioned that as well. What other tips do you have for a law student or maybe a lawyer that's looking to change career paths for working in this field? What would you recommend that they do to prepare?
I think if you're a law student or even a pre-law student looking to see if your law school has a veterans clinic, or even if there is, another law school nearby that has a veterans clinic. I know a lot of law schools will kind of do reciprocal clinic participation for credits, or you might be able to intern there. Just looking, it seems like this is a niche area, but when you look into it further, the need is huge. And if you can set your skill set and establish that early on, then that makes you extremely marketable and first in line for these kinds of jobs. So I would say early on, look and see if there's any law school opportunities or any internships. You could even start out in a government internship, I started out at the Illinois Department of Veterans Affairs in their general counsel, just interning through an Equal Justice Works internship, and just looking at fellowships and internships and things like that. Now, if you're looking for a career change, I would say that at a lot of metropolitan areas, if they have legal service organizations, a lot of those legal service organizations internally will have a dedicated staff person to helping veterans. As well as you can look online at va.gov/VSO. There will be a huge directory of veteran service organizations that you can reach out to do pro bono work and maybe establish your skill set. There's a wide variety of trainings, and I'll drop some links to some free trainings that Swords to Plowshares has done to get your VA accreditation. But there's a wealth of ways that you can go about this work. And I would also say, great, amazing tip would be to reach out to these panelists, because P.A.D people love connecting other people. So definitely, feel free to reach out to us.
Excellent. Thank you, Holly. Sam, I'm going to put you on the spot next. Since you're active duty, what, from your perspective, if somebody's interested in going into the JAG Corps, what advice would you have for them?
So if you're a law student interested in going in the JAG Corps, do an internship. Being active duty comes with its own set of challenges. So like right now, I'm not allowed to go on vacation. I am not allowed to travel. I'm not allowed to go anywhere without like a 1-star general saying that I can do that. So that's how, I'm a military member. So I get ordered to do things, and I see a lot of times that can be a really big struggle for people when they come in, because they come in and they think, oh, I'm just going to be an attorney. And that's not the case. I'm an Air Force officer first, and my job as an Air Force officer is an attorney. A lot of attorneys that I even work with now really, really struggle with that. I had to go to a form of basic training. I had to eat MREs and do things that I march around in formation, like things that an attorney would never need to know how to do, but I had to do that because I'm an Air Force officer first. And the same for all the other services, right? So do an internship, and when you do the internship, dive headfirst in. If it means getting up at 5 a.m. and going to PT, get your butt up at 5 a.m. and go to PT, because that's what's going to be required of you when you are on active duty. I have to take a PT test once every 6 months or once a year, depending on how you score on it. I have to look a certain way in uniform. So I can't have, even as much as I want to have blue streaks in my hair, I can't. I'm not allowed to. I have to wear my hair in a bun every day. So if you're not okay with, that's where I see a lot of people struggle, is they don't realize that that's what it's like as a military member. So intern somewhere. Not to mention, when you're applying to our boards across the services, if you can get a JAG to write you a letter of recommendation, it puts you light years ahead of the people that are applying to the board. And I know for the Air Force, each one of our boards gets somewhere between 500 and 800 applicants. We're definitely not hurting for people, and every year we only bring in 90 new JAGs. We are one of the smaller services, so the Navy and the Army are much larger, so they bring in larger numbers. But think of those things that will make you, put you ahead of your peers, right? I always tell people, have your resume tell a story. I liked, when I review resumes, to really see what somebody has focused on. So like when I was in law school, I wanted my resume to say a couple things. I wanted to just show that I had a good writing skills, because as a JAG, we do a lot of writing. I wanted to show I was dedicated to public and government service. And that I had leadership qualities, right? Because as an officer, you have to have leadership qualities. So I focused on those two things. So have your resume tell a story. If you're later on and you're looking at making a career change, you probably won't be able to intern anywhere, but do your research. Those people, because you've been out in the regular world for a little while, I know no different. This was my first big girl job, so this is what I know to be how an adult does their job. People that come in after they've worked in DA's offices, public defenders, private firms, sometimes struggle even more because they're maybe a little older. Maybe they have a family, they're more established. And now all of a sudden you have somebody telling you what to do all day, every day. You have to ask permission, when you first come in, you may not have a whole lot of leeway with your schedule. So you're told you need to be here at 7:30. You cannot leave until this time. You need to go to this briefing. So do your research, talk to people, and really understand what the commitment is. Understand that we do deploy. Anywhere there are military members, there is a JAG somewhere. Almost every major decision that's made by a military command has a JAG behind the scenes advising on it. That includes targeting. So you will go to places that are not necessarily where a lot of people would like to go. Some people come in thinking, oh, well, JAGs don't deploy. They just stay stateside or get stationed in really cool places like Japan or Germany, which is not the case. So just do your research and understand kind of what you're getting into, because it is and I appreciate earlier somebody said civilians. So in the military, we constantly, and if you're military connected, you know the term. You have active duty, you have reservists and guardsmen, and then you have dependents, and you have retirees and civilians. Civilians are the people that have no military connection. So if you are one of those people, just do your research. But it is super, super fulfilling work to know that you are contributing to the national security of our country. And in my job as a defense counsel, I actually get to represent the airmen as they're going through the discharge process. So I'm helping to ensure that their records are built in such a way so that when they get out and they need help from one of the VSOs, I've built the record so that they can take it to them and be like, hey, my ADC, Area Defense Council, that's what they call us, wasn't able to get me any relief from my command, but they did all these things so that they built this record so that maybe you can help me. So I get to give back in that way now. So it's super fulfilling.
Ava asked if you think it would be easier to become a JAG if you've already served or currently are serving. I haven't sat a JAG board in a very long time. Do you have any input, Sam, as to whether that helps?
So I think that it does help in the sense that you know what it's like to be in the military, right? So you are an investment. We are a piece of property of the government, so to speak, right? So the government is investing money into me. And when you have that prior service, they already know that you are prepared and you know what you're getting yourself into. So I think that it does help. If your service was positive, right? So they have references that they call. So they're going to probably call look at your old evaluations and stuff like that. But it's not a deal breaker. I had no military affiliation outside of being married to somebody who was in the Army. So that would be my 2 cents on that part.
Excellent. Thank you. Jenny, how about you? What advice do you have for a law student or somebody looking to switch careers?
Oh, okay. I posted a couple of tips in the chat, but I will reiterate those. So I have a lot of tips, but I think it's probably more time efficient if I just point you in the direction of a jobs panel that the CAVC Bar Association just held in October. And it's on the CAVC Bar Association's LinkedIn page. It was right at the end of my term as president, so I can vet it. And so the one pager that's also linked to that post also includes current job openings that we heard of through the grapevine, including one at my firm. I think Holly had some really great suggestions, but I wanted to quickly piggyback on one of Kristen's comments about how it can be kind of difficult to get into this field if you're moving around a lot. And I will say that it's really wonderful how the VA, and particularly the Board of Veterans Appeals, has really shown preference for military spouses, and they have a robust remote program. Similarly, my firm also prefers veterans and military spouses and also has a robust remote program. And it's because of these programs that allow for work from home that the court and VA and firms like my own were able to continue operating without pause, serving veterans during the pandemic. And I will also note that you can be barred in any state and still practice veterans law, whether you're practicing before the agency, serving veterans, trying to get their claims and appeals approved within the agency, or if you're practicing before the court. I'm barred in Tennessee and Maryland, but the court itself is in DC, and we've got veterans and practitioners from all around the world, really, who serve American veterans before the court. So that would be really great for folks who move around a lot. And there are also clerkships that are available at the court as well. There are internships that are available at VA and at the Board of Veterans Appeals. And most of the time, those are not on usajobs.gov. The clerkships, I'm not really sure exactly how that works. It's on the video that I pointed you to, but the internships at VA's Office of General Counsel, who are wonderful folks who are my opposing counsel, they're posted from word of mouth. So the first people who end up finding out are usually the CAVC Bar Association Board of Governors. So that's when we post it out, we send emails out, and we post on our website, which is whatever, but mostly by email. So I really encourage y'all, it's free for the first year. If you're interested at all in veterans law, just to go ahead and join, just so you can see our emails, and you don't have to like do anything or anything. It's kind of like P.A.D, we're very, very collegial. And so that is a really great way then to also meet folks within the practice, because the CAVC Bar Association, as well as the National Organization of Veterans Advocates, or NOVA, they're the two main national organizations for veterans law practitioners. And once you get to know folks, that's when you start to hear more about job opportunities, because it's a niche field, most of the job openings are through the back door.
Excellent, thank you. Kristen, how about you? Do you have any tips or tricks for upcoming practitioners?
Sure. So one thing I wanted to say about, I think it was Sam, about the internships. One thing to note is I also recommend applying for them, but they are very competitive. So I applied for 2 of them and didn't get either one, but I mean, I'm still pro-military. But just one thing to keep in mind is, even if you don't get it, like after your first year, apply again your next year if it's something you really, really are interested and passionate about. I unfortunately applied between my 2L and 3L year. So after I graduated, the internship opportunity door had kind of closed. But they are competitive, so don't let that discourage you from applying, but it is something to keep in mind. And don't be afraid to apply to more than one branch. So don't just say, I only want to go to the Air Force, or I only want to go to the Army, or I only want to go to the Navy, because there are a lot of opportunities out there. I have family that was Air Force, I have family that was Navy, I have family that was Army. I mean, I don't think I'm the only one that has multiple branches in my background, but there's also volunteer opportunities on base if you live near a base. I didn't know that either, and I lived right next to Great Lakes Naval Base growing up. I wish I had known that. Also, if you can't necessarily get into a military internship, I agree with Holly looking at local clinics, because JMLS, John Marshall Law School in Chicago, I think it's UIC John Marshall now, has a very, very good legal clinic for Veterans Affairs. And they take people from, I know when I was there, we had someone from Loyola and someone from DePaul. I almost said DeKalb, and I was like, that's wrong. So they will let other people come into their clinic, because I think it's one of the only ones in Chicago, which Holly, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But also don't be afraid to reach out to the public defender's office and the state's attorney's office, because as we've kind of noted, they do have a veterans court in a lot of different places. And that's another way to get involved with the veterans court aspect. As far as looking to switch careers, I don't really have much input on that. I kind of was public defender, defense attorney for civil law. But just there's a lot of opportunities that don't necessarily have the veteran stamp on it, but it's still ways to get involved with veteran affairs.
Excellent. Thank you. I was watching the chat, multiple panelists enforcing volunteer. And I'd like to point out, you don't have to be next to a major base to potentially have volunteer opportunities. For example, the Navy Reserves works out of what we call Naval Operations Centers, and they're in random places you would never expect them to be. And most of them have a JAG element as well. So you don't have to necessarily be on Bragg or near Great Lakes to find these opportunities. So if you ever need help finding those, I'm sure any of the panelists would help you nail that down. Well, I can't believe it's almost 8:15 already. So I have one more question for the panelists, but before we go to that, I wanted to open the floor for questions. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And if it's for a particular panelist, just note who that is. And now that I've asked that question, what I'd like the panelists to think about is, can you think of a story of a time where working with the military or veteran population made a real impact in your life, like a standout story, something that you kind of hang your hat on as a cool story? And we've got a couple questions coming in, so we'll move to that. So the first question was, how does becoming an attorney with the military or other branches affect family relationships? That's a very good question. Let's start with our spouses. Not somebody speak up or I'll call on you. Kristen, I saw you on mute. Go ahead.
So I have no talking to that. Oh, go ahead. I would say if you want to.
It doesn't matter. You can go ahead.
So I was an attorney before my husband enlisted, and it has really messed with him. And the reason being, Rhode Island is a very small state, and it's a very small community, and the military community is that much smaller. And the organization that I work with is the main veteran VSO in the state. Like, you go to Rhode Island, you need veteran services, the first thing you hear usually is Operation Stand Down, right? So it's really funny because nobody knew who he was. He was a private when most people go in as a private. He was like an E-nothing, right? Like he was a fuzzy, and those of you who are in know what that is, right? He was nobody. And then we got married, and I changed my name and I hyphenated it. And in the last year since we got married, people realized my name changed, and now they say, "Oh, Koenig, are you related to the attorney that works at Operation Stand Down?" And he kind of like does the, "Yeah, that's my wife. Yeah." And it got really interesting when his commander started noticing him. And for those of you that are currently enlisted, you know that lower enlisted never want the commander to know who they are, because usually that's not a good thing. And he was very, very big on that. He was very like, "I don't want anyone to know who I am. I'm going to keep my head down and do my job and just run through the ranks. And when the time comes, they'll know who I am." But then he decided to deploy. And I didn't decide. My boss asked me to go to their yellow ribbon event. And for those who don't know what a yellow ribbon is, they do a pre-deployment and a post-deployment yellow ribbon. And it's basically all the service providers in the area come out and they talk to the soldiers and their families and say, these are the services provided to you. This is what we can do for you. This is what we're here for. Please reach out to us. So I went on behalf of Operation Stand Down because we knew legal services would be a big thing. And I'm obviously close to the military community. And I got up, and he hadn't told his commander that I was his spouse. They had no idea of my connection to Stand Down. And as soon as I said my name, I watched both his captain and his first sergeant whip their head around and look at him and say, "You didn't tell us that your wife worked at Operation Stand Down." And I think he turned about 8 shades of red. So it's very interesting. Being both a spouse and a service provider, it's been a very unique opportunity. And it's usually at his expense, which makes it even better.
Kristen, you were going to say something as well?
Yeah, so I was in law school when I got married to my husband, and he was actually in the program that he's instructing at now. Most of the time I was in law school. I was in Chicago and he was in Florida. So one thing I can say as a military spouse is you kind of have to be prepared to do a lot of things on your own and to kind of make your own way. So a lot of people I saw in the comments reaching out saying, call local places and just ask to volunteer. You have to be very proactive with that if you want to find a job, but also look at your organizations that are out there. So Phi Alpha Delta is great too. I remember having a conversation with Rhonda Hill. I'm gonna plug this. I know Derek's on here. And she said one thing she told me when I was in law school, it was my first convention. And I asked her what it's like to be a military spouse and an attorney. And she said, it's difficult, but know where your friends are and lean on them. So especially being so involved with Phi Alpha Delta, we have people in every state. So if you are a military spouse or a military family and you move to Tennessee, I never lived in Tennessee, but I know a lot of attorneys in Tennessee. And if I reached out saying, hey, this is where I'm living, do you know anybody here to help me get a foot in the door? As somebody else has said, P.A.D wants to help you. Same with the military, MSJDN. There's groups of those all over the country. I met 3 of them living in Clovis, New Mexico, which I'm sure most people on here haven't even heard of Clovis, New Mexico. Prior to getting orders there, I didn't know it existed. My husband told me we got orders to Cannon, and I burst into tears. Because I had a job opportunity lined up in Florida. Like I was all set to take the Florida bar, and he's like, nope, we're going to New Mexico. So that, and like you said, you really have to be flexible because things are going to change. And it seems like the rug is going to be pulled out from you every 10 seconds. A lot of people have experienced that with COVID this year. And I've seen the memes going around is you've clearly never had your PCS orders changed last minute, and it's showing. So there's a lot of opportunities out there. All I can say is be proactive and find out where your friends are. And I hate to say it, it sounds bad, but you're going to spend time alone. In the two and a half years or whatever I lived in New Mexico, my husband was gone over 9 months on deployment. He did 3 deployments while we were there, including while I was 3 months pregnant with my first son and 4 months after my first son was born. So you do have to be prepared to spend a little bit of time alone, but it makes homecomings that much sweeter, which I know we have a service member in Texas who can't wait to get home.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. Sam, I think this is going to be mainly directed towards you, but if any of the panelists have some insight on JAG as well, a 2-part, I'm going to combine a few questions here. What are some of the traits, the top 1 or 2 traits that you think a potential JAG officer needs to have to make them stand out? And do you see JAG as a career path to work in some of our other government agencies once you get out of the service? You're on mute. Okay.
So I'll answer the first question first. So that was my intent when I came in, because I knew dual mil would not work for very long, especially with my husband's job. He's very high ops tempo. So I was like, 4 years, I'm done. I'm going to get we call them GS jobs, right? On base. And I just really liked it. But yes, being a JAG, I've been told by people who have GS jobs, contract attorney jobs on base, that's the way to get your foot in the door. And most people that are in those jobs have been JAGs before, because it's all about networking. Landing one of those federal jobs is, if you're not in DC. So I'm talking about if you're not wanting to live in the DC area where there's a high concentration of those jobs, network. It's all about networking at the local level. So I definitely think that if it stands out. I've never had anybody look at JAG experience and be like, oh, JAGs are horrible lawyers. No, they're usually like, oh, you know what you're doing. So it's a good thing. It's very fast tempo, high speed work. So they know that you're quick on your feet, and they know you've kind of, what we call it in the military, you drank from the fire hose, which basically means that you know how to deal with stuff quickly, and you know how to, you're just quick on your feet. So that's kind of the message that it sends. As far as characteristics, so I've never been on one of our hiring boards or our boards, right? Selection boards. It's the whole person concept is what they look at. So I can tell you that just by being number one in your class, that's not going to get you selected. They really look at all things. For me personally, when I talk to people, you need to have good communication skills. That's written and oral communication skills. And there's a couple different ways that you can show that, right? I took every single writing course that I could take at my school. I took seminar classes that where I had to write papers, and then I was able to submit a paper to be published. So I was published. I had that on my resume, which is not as sexy as what it sounds like. Just take one of the papers that you wrote for a class, make sure that it looks pretty, and submit it to a law review. You'd be shocked at how, it's not really that difficult of a process if you're dealing with a novel issue, but that's something that'll make you stand out. Trial advocacy, moot court, a mock trial. The other part is leadership. So being involved in extracurriculars. If you don't want to be involved in law school extracurriculars, volunteering different places, doing internships, getting that practical experience. They want to see a well-rounded person. They want to see somebody that's not just good at school and is, good in the books. They want to see somebody, they'd rather have somebody that's top third of their class and has all these different characteristics than just somebody who's shown that they can read a book and take a test well. And I don't mean that to be negative for people who are like that, but that's just what we're looking for, because we don't spend very much time at our desk. And we're required to give legal advice very quickly and find answers very quickly. Nicole, what do you call it? Semper Gumby. Be very flexible. So that is my personal opinion, having not been on a hiring board, but I have worked for 6 people who have been on our selection boards, and that's kind of what they have told me as well. You, as a brand new JAG, you can expect to be a prosecutor in your first job, at least in the Air Force. My very first time I ever stepped foot in a federal courtroom, I was trying a felony level sexual assault case. So you will get very heavy subject matter. And I will tell you, our docket right now in the military across the services is sex cases. So you need to make sure that you're comfortable with that subject matter. That's the environment that we're living in right now. And so whether you're prosecuting or you're defending, or you're serving as one of our special victims counsels, which are our attorneys that are assigned to represent domestic violence and sexual assault victims, you're gonna experience a lot of that. So be prepared to litigate, at least in your first 4 years. After that, you can kind of get out of it if you want to, but your first 4 years, you will be litigating. So know that. And then I saw there was another question. I'll just answer that one real quick. Moving every 2 years does prevent you from specializing. Yes. In the JAG Corps, they don't really let you specialize, at least in the Air Force, until your third assignment, which is usually like year 4 or 5. Like where I'm at right now. Before I moved to be an area defense counsel, I was I was a deputy staff judge advocate. So I was number 2 in the legal office. And then I was just an assistant staff judge advocate, meaning I did whatever my boss told me to do. And I had a caseload if I was a federal prosecutor. So it definitely, it's very hard to specialize in the JAG Corps. I know the Army and the Navy are a little bit better at that. They do have some tracks where you can specialize, but in the Air Force, it's a very uncommon thing, which is why we lose a lot of really good attorneys, because we're all leaders is what they say. They want us all to be in aspire to be in leadership positions. And so therefore we don't need to specialize. We need to know a little bit about everything.
Thank you, Sam. And General Hill, I'm going to put you on the spot because somebody sent me a private message asking me to ask you this question directly as well. What do you think, if you don't mind answering, what do you think is the number 1 or 2 trait that JAGs need to be getting ready for?
Having passion for what you do, and for being a member of the United States Air Force or any member of the United States Services. I think that's very, very important. And I think it was Sam that pointed it out. You're an officer first. That's extremely important. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Was that the question, Nicole?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. Sorry to put you on the spot, but you are a subject matter expert here, so we greatly appreciate you chiming in. Well, it is 8:26, and I want to make sure that I'm respectful of everybody's time. I believe most of our panelists have been, or all of our panelists have been engaging in the chat, and I think we've addressed all the questions. I will request the panelists, if you're comfortable with it, if you would please put your contact information back in the chat, just because I think it's gotten lost in some of the messages. So attendees, please feel free to reach out to any of the panelists with any questions you have. I'm going to give a few plugs, and then I'd like to go around the panel one last time, if you don't mind sharing a story. So first off, we are officially, and in fact, a number of the people on the call tonight have been working on a military chapter for Phi Alpha Delta, an alumni military chapter. And we are about ready to really, it has to be chartered and all that good stuff, but we are looking for people that are interested in that concept and may want to be part of the chartering organization. So I just put a link in the chat that if you are interested, please fill out that form and we'll be in touch to talk about the next step. I'm very excited about this. This has been a project we've been working on for a little while, and thank you to everybody who's been helping me facilitate it. Tomorrow, I am really unbelievably excited about the fact we're doing a huge virtual initiation tomorrow. We have over 100 new members being initiated virtually, and I believe almost 200 attendees. You are welcome to attend if you've already been initiated. Emily from the executive office has been calling this a recommitment ceremony, so I hope you can make it. So if you haven't registered, please register for that. And then on Friday, we have another great webinar at same time as tonight, so 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, on non-traditional careers with a JD. So thank you everyone for your support of Founders Week and for attending this panel tonight. And I'm truly honored to have been involved in this. I'm just floored at the amazing panelists we have here. You guys are super motivating. So to close it out, I'd like to go around the horn one more time. And if you would share a motivating or inspirational story, whatever suits your fancy, of a good experience you've had working with the military and veterans community. Whoever wants to speak up first, go ahead. Okay, Kristen, I'm going to call on you first.
All right. So experience working specifically with a veteran was, it came during the summer between my 1L and 2L year when I was working at the Veterans Clinic. And I got to meet 2 veterans, because I worked with 4 veterans that summer because I was taking it for credit. So I had to do 4 caseloads, or 4 cases, not caseloads. That would be insane. But just being able to sit and hear their stories, not so much about, I went to the VA and they denied me for this and said I could possibly be connected for that, but listening to them talk and hearing their stories firsthand. So there's something to be said about live history, to me at least. I'm a history nerd. I love museums. I love to read. But nothing ever hits the same way or hits as hard as hearing it from somebody who lived it versus seeing it in a black and white picture. So I had a veteran from both Korea and Vietnam, and they were telling me stories about things that happened to them, and they are not service connected for it. And it, like Holly, it just made me so angry that somebody could look at this person and say, well, you don't have feeling in your fingertips and you had frostbite, but that's fine. You don't need feeling in your fingertips. Like, who knows, maybe that person was a musician before they went to the service and now they can't play their instrument because they can't feel their fingers anymore. So hearing the stories from people who went through it, both good and bad, because in my experience with the service members I know who are currently serving and who are retired and who are veterans, they've all had both good and bad things to say. And they're the ones I hear a lot are, I'm still friends with my roommate or my bunkmate from basic training. Or I still talk to them to this day. Like my husband's not roommate, but next door neighbor at basic officer training, or BOT, was supposed to be in our wedding. He now lives down the street from us. Like, we're still good friends. He's on a completely different aircraft, but we've been stationed at the same base as them twice. So it's just those kind of stories make me want to fight for justice for the people who who it has been denied for.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. Holly, do you have a story you want to share with us?
Absolutely. I've had quite a few clients that were affected either by military sexual trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, racial discrimination within the military, things like that, who, because of that trauma, because of that discrimination, I recently won a case where the veteran that I was representing was one of two Latino veterans in his unit. He was discriminated against, called names and racial slurs. He then was physically assaulted and refused to ship off with the perpetrators of this physical assault. And because he refused to get on the same Navy ship as the perpetrators of this physical assault, he was considered AWOL and kicked out with what we call bad papers, less than honorable papers. I was able to get the VA to consider his service honorable for VA purposes, get him $30K in back pay for his post-traumatic stress disorder from that physical assault, as well as ongoing benefits, VA service-connected disability benefits. I'm currently working on correcting his military records to reflect that he served honorably, and that, going AWOL was mitigated by his mental health factors and his fear of retaliation for the retaliation. And so that's a story that's really near and dear to my heart, and a client that I'm very fond of, because it really highlights the different struggles that our members of the military go through and the effect that it can have on their life. This veteran came to our organization homeless, living in San Francisco, and now he is going to be a college graduate and going to grad school. So I'm really proud of him, and that was just one of the most meaningful moments in my life.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. That's so great to hear. Jenny, would you mind sharing a story if you have one?
Sure. So I've got a few. I could take the liberty of sharing one story and then one mini story, if I may. So one of my duties at the firm was having the privilege, really it's a privilege, not a duty, to train American Legion VSOs at their biannual conference that they have in DC and then also in Indianapolis. And so these are hundreds of VSOs who, for free, represent veterans in their claims and appeals within VA. And there's plenty of work. So if the veterans win their claims and appeals within VA, it's not like I'm going to be out of a job at the court, but it was just incredibly fulfilling to see how our training would be able to be translated and trickle down to better and more effectively representing thousands of veterans across the country. And we got to hear a lot of their stories as to exactly what's going on the ground. And this was right at the time when VA implemented this new process called appeal. It's under the new act, the Appeals Modernization and Improvement Act of 2017, and they implemented it first with a pilot program and then fully implemented it in 2019. And there are certainly good things about this program, but there are a lot of hiccups, and we're all still trying to work through these hiccups, both in VA and at the federal court. And so we saw a lot of these hiccups with, filling out the wrong form, and these are just systemic issues that are happening to thousands of veterans. And so we were really trying to work closely with our VSO partners, including the American Legion and folks such as VFW, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and other VSOs to try and gather data and gather these stories and see what we can do on the litigation side to help these folks. And then fast forward about 1 year, and I started to see those cases trickling in onto my docket, and saw as these folks who pursued their claims for years, appealed their denials within VA, and then were told by the Board of Veterans Appeals, after waiting for 5 to 7 years on average, that the Board of Veterans Appeals is not going to address their case on the merits at all because they filled out the wrong form to appeal to the board. So I actually ended up getting over 20 cases with that same issue, and it's heartbreaking, certainly, that it got to this point, because usually what happens is there are millions of claims that go into VA, and then only a small portion of those are actually appealed to the Board of Veterans Appeals, because those are the cases that are kind of wishy-washy. There might be some gray areas. And then when they get up to the court, it's an even smaller percentage, and those are supposed to be the cases that are hard. Those are supposed to be the cases that, you're like, okay, so I really need to put my lawyer hat on, because all the other folks behind me weren't able to figure this out. But what was heartbreaking for me is I was seeing these 20 plus veterans who waited this long to get their appeals heard by the Board of Veterans Appeals, and their cases were just dismissed. And so I had the privilege of helping them, and so their cases are going back to VA. Some of them so far, not all, some of them are still in development. One of those cases, it was heartbreaking to me because this man served for 20 years and received many, many decorations, including the Distinguished Flying Cross for heroism in the air. And he pursued his claim for all these years, and they just dismissed his case. You would think that they would think a little hard. Okay, anyways, but so for me to be able to help these folks, especially in a time of great change in the law with a great amount of confusion and how to navigate the system, is very satisfying to me, and I'm continuing to do so in these cases. And I just wanted to share that little point there. And so to take my liberty of doing a mini story, it's not about my brother-in-law, who is a major in the Air Force as well, Samantha. And he actually very recently returned from a deployment in the Persian Gulf, and his wife Jan is wonderful. They have a new baby on the way, the second one, and right before he deployed to the Persian Gulf was when COVID-19 struck. And so right before his deployment, when he was really trying to spend as much time as he could with his family, COVID-19 struck, and he received orders to within 24 hours to execute a mission. And so he's with Air Mobility Command, and they had their first operational use of their system for aero medical evacuation. And they had 24 hours to evacuate US government contractors from Afghanistan to Ramstein Air Base in Germany. And so, bam, he just went, he left, he ensured that the mission worked. When I say he, I mean his team, but I'm going to give him credits. And they successfully. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mention these U.S. government contractors contracted COVID-19, so they needed to very quickly evacuate them from Afghanistan in a way that was medically safe. And so they did their first operational use of this transport isolation system that they have. And it was the first time they had done it since the Ebola outbreak in 2014. And they did it, they got them out. And so now they have a system for evacuating folks with COVID-19 in a safe and effective and quick way. And so yay to Major Nicholas Gumley, my brother-in-law.
That's fabulous. Thank you for sharing that. It just reminds me how involved the military, like how many different areas we have to be aware of. We're talking law, and same time people are, figuring out how to air evac COVID patients. That's just amazing. So thank you for sharing that story. I appreciate it. Kaylin, how about you? Do you have a story for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm trying to decide between two because I do a lot of different areas of law. So like I have disability related stories and other stuff. So I think the one that really affected me the most, and I think it affected me the most because I didn't realize this was something that military members face. So I had a veteran come to me. He was an Iraq veteran. He had been in an explosion IED in Iraq, and he had had a traumatic brain injury. Several years later, he was home, he had started a family, and unfortunately he had a stroke. And they did connect that stroke to his TBI and everything that had happened with his head injury in Iraq. So him and his wife had divorced, and his wife was really understanding of it. The stroke unfortunately resulted in him having like a permanent inability to talk. So he basically lost his ability to talk. He communicated by making sounds and using his hands. He was trying to learn sign language, but it didn't really take. But he was able to communicate enough with his family that they knew what was going on. They were making it work. When they divorced, his ex-wife was very understanding. She knew that he was able to still take care of his child despite these limitations. She understood that, unfortunately, this is one of the sacrifices that comes with being a soldier. And, she was really great about it. They had a really great setup. They shared custody, stuff like that. Well, the mother unexpectedly died. So their son was 14. Mom unexpectedly dies, and this little boy, he was a teenager, he actually found his mom. And next thing you know, he now has just dad, which is fine. Well, mom's parents, so maternal grandparents, step in. They take the son to visit because he was like, of course, go see your grandparents. And then they never gave him back. So they actually kept the child and wouldn't bring him home. And he's 14. So what is he going to do? Run away, right? And they filed a custody suit alleging that he could not take care of his kid because he had a stroke and a brain injury and couldn't talk. So this veteran comes to me and he's like, I don't know what to do. Like, I take care of my son just fine. And in the years, he had been recently married, he had been remarried, he was in another relationship, he had other kids with the second wife. Like, he was perfectly capable of taking care of his kids. And he's like, I don't understand. I don't understand how somebody could like do that. Like, he's been taking care of his kid for years. Like, why are you just now coming in and saying, well, no, you can't take care of him, especially as a grandparent, right? Like, in the state of Rhode Island, like every family law, states are different, but in the state of Rhode Island, grandparent, there's no such thing as grandparents' custody rights. In the state of Rhode Island, you can ask for visitation rights, but even that is very difficult. So it was just a horrible situation. He's crying in my office. He's like, I can't lose my son. I can take care of him, and his wife was sitting there helping translate because he obviously can't communicate well. Very, very, very upset. And it kind of just blew my mind that this man served our country. He was in an IED explosion. He now has a brain injury, and somebody's trying to take his kid away because of it. Like, no. Luckily, I was able to file a motion to dismiss in the family law case. I relied on some, believe it or not, really weird, not so common case law in Rhode Island, basically saying, while grandparents have the right to visitation, sometimes they don't have the right to custody, and therefore this case is moot, and it should just be dismissed as like there's no standing here. It was a standing argument. And luckily, the judge I had was really, really great, and he looked at the opposing attorney who I went to law school with, which was the funny thing, because I looked at my friend from law school and I said, Alex, what the hell are you doing? Like, are you really arguing this case right now? And he didn't want to hear it, and we haven't talked since, believe it or not, because I was just so like, the anger, it just that, I'm sorry, like I can't even come up with words, right? Like you can see I'm struggling 2 years later to come up with words to describe the situation. And I was like, Alex, how could you do this? Like he's an Iraq veteran. Like he can take care of his kid. Plus the kid's 14. Like, don't get me wrong, but like how much care does a 14-year-old need? Like get him out of bed and get him to school. Congratulations, your job is done. Like, and I know it's not that simple, like shout out to all the parents. You guys have a really hard job, but like, it's not like he has to give him a shower and make his meals for him. And he had a stepmom who was doing all that stuff anyway, because the kid was spoiled AF, right? So I was so mad. Luckily, the judge was on our side and said, there is case law here. That said this case has no standing. I have to dismiss the case. They didn't even look at us. They just stormed out of the room. And then we actually had, they had brought the child with them to court. And we had gotten the sheriff involved and set up a meetup for him to come home to like dad and stepmom. And it's very rare that I see grown men cry, but let me tell you, he came to my office with his son later that week. And he was like, I can't thank you enough. And his son was there. And he's like, I can't believe that this is something that I have to face. And the grandparents actually didn't even give up. I found out weeks later they had called our local DCYF, the Department of Children and Families, to have dad investigated. And of course, DCYF was like, he's fine, go away. And they weren't happy. But I had never had an experience like that with a veteran. You think, trauma and disability and VA disability benefits and homelessness, but you don't think that people actually try to take their kids away because of some of the injuries they face after service. And I was new to it, right? Like this was like 2.5, 3 years ago. Like I had just started in that world, and I was like, I can't believe this is a thing. And I was so glad I was able to help it. And it made me really wonder, like, how many people are potentially losing their kids because they decided to serve their country and they were ordered to war and they were hurt. And now they have some limitations, and somebody thinks, well, this is a good excuse to take their kids away. Like that's just not okay to me. That case really still clearly angers me. But yeah, that's one that resonated. Gotta love him. Jimmy, he's my boy. I still see him. I still call him, check in, make sure he's, doing his dadly duties.
I love it. Thank you. The passion is just outstanding. It makes me so happy. And Sam, last but not least, do you have a story you'd like to share with us?
Sure, Kaylin, like I can't tell, my blood was boiling as I'm hearing you tell this story. And it is sad. And I say this story. I also volunteer with MSJDN has a project called Justice for Military Families. As a government attorney, I unfortunately cannot do pro bono work. I'm precluded from doing that. But I do volunteer and help placing cases for Gold Star families that need legal services. And I'm telling you guys, like, once you get licensed, or if you're on this call and you are licensed, please consider, donating, whether your state bar requires it or not, doing pro bono and helping out. Because sometimes many cases that we get coming through Gold Star families, and we use that term very broadly. So if you've had a service member that passed away, either veteran or service member, we help to find you either pro bono or low bono resources. And sometimes it's just simple, like talk them through the probate process. And they are so, so thankful. We have more complicated issues, but there are families out there that absolutely need help, and they can't afford it. Some of them can't even get access to their like survivor benefits because of immigration issues, or, they just don't understand the process. Or like Jenny said, they filled out the wrong form and it keeps getting sent back to them. So plug for that, when you are able to financially and everything, just consider giving back some time in whichever way, suits your heart. But a story. So interesting enough, I'm a JAG, so I'm a government attorney. I'm employed by the Air Force. And I was a total government hack up until about a year ago when I became a defense counsel. I'm still in the Air Force, but they let a couple of us every year go over and be defense counsel. So instead of representing the government, I now represent airmen. I was very nervous to make the change because I was a government hack. So like I thought, and I took that job very seriously, meaning that if I saw something going, my role as a prosecutor, as a government attorney, was to make sure justice was being done. And if that meant that a commander or a command was not following the law, then my job was to tell them, no, you cannot do that, and you need to quit screwing over this airman. And I encourage anybody who's on the line considering JAG, or if you are a JAG, see your role as a government attorney, it's not about wins as a prosecutor. It's really not. It's about justice. And sometimes justice is losing. So just keep that in mind. Or justice is stepping back and being like, the Air Force is messing up. We don't need to do this. Because when I'm in that role, I am operating on the best interest of the Air Force. So that kind of trickled over, but I was really nervous to be a defense counsel. So one of my very first cases, we had an airman. He actually fell from a second-story balcony and about died. He fell off a balcony. He was in ICU for about 12 days. And it caused some very significant mental health stuff to start to happen, mental health diagnoses. He was struggling. So he was going through a medical evaluation board because of the mental health stuff that was going on. It was so significant. He was not able to continue to serve, which he was fine with. He was struggling with coming to terms with that, because up until that, he was spot on airman, had no issues. Well, there were his command tried giving him an Article 15. He had an episode. We argued a mental incapacity argument. They turned it off because his psychiatrist said he was in he could not appreciate the nature of his actions. He had no idea that he had done what he had done. So they turned that off. There was some allegations of when he was admitted to the hospital when he fell from the balcony, a medical screening test detected THC in his urine. Everybody knows, military members, we can't smoke pot, right? Can't take anything with THC. Well, medical screening tests are very, very inaccurate, right? And I had a drug testing lab expert basically write me an affidavit saying, like, these tests are not accurate. They should not be the basis for anything. They're used for medical purposes only. I submitted that to the command. His first level commander turned off the paperwork. Was like, yep, I believe you. Turn this off. We're going to let him med board. Well, his group commander found out about it, or his next higher commander found out about it and didn't like that decision. So he withheld authority, which is something they do in the military, and started to take action at his level. I can't tell you I wrote a Unlawful Command Influence memo. I mean, I was so livid. And this guy is just like, I'm telling him, just show up to work. Like, this is going to be a battle. I got you. Like, just keep going to work, stay out of trouble, keep taking your meds. Like, we're going to get you what you need. I mean, what was on the line here was 100% medical retirement. They were wanting to take that away from him. They were wanting to discharge him under general service characterization. So I'm writing all these memos. I'm fighting. It goes all the way up, right? And I'm fighting tooth and nail. All the commanders are like, nope, he smoked pot. He smoked pot. He needs to get discharged. Gets up to the 2-star level, and I know the civilian attorney that works for the 2-star, and I called her, and I was talking through the case, and obviously I was very, very heated. All it took was this kid getting down and stopped taking his meds, and things were going to go. I mean, his mental health diagnosis was that significant. And I'm talking to her, and she's looking through the paperwork. She's like, how in the hell did this make it through? Why is this not turned off? She's like, this doesn't make sense to me. What are all these commanders thinking? And I'm like, thank you. That's what I've been saying this whole time. But good news story, after 9 months of fighting, the 2-star actually allowed him to medically retire at 100% disability rating. When I called to tell it, because we found out about it during COVID, so I couldn't meet with him in person. But when I found out about it and I called him to tell him the results, he started crying on the phone, and he's like, ma'am, I can't tell you, like, you saved, like, he literally said, you saved me. He's like, I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been there to fight for me. And that really was very moving, because when you're a government attorney, the government doesn't really thank you that way, right? you don't get that type of emotion. So I don't get very many clients that walk through my door where I truly feel like the Air Force is just trampling over them, like they are lost in the system. But I have had a few, and he was the first one where we got a really significant outcome for him, and it felt really good. I was so happy. I text him and I check up on him, and he's doing great. He's going to school. He's having to learn. We focused on, when we would talk, right, he would say, I'm just so different now. And I was like, no, you have a new normal. I was like, you're not weird. It's not different. You just have a new normal, and you're going to learn you're going to be okay. And so he's doing that, and it makes me so very proud. And I'm so thankful that I got the opportunity to represent him, and to help him through the process, because he would have been lost. And he probably had he not sought help, he probably would have lost all of his benefits. And hopefully he would have ran into one of you guys on the back end to help him to fight that battle. But yeah, it's so moving, and I can't tell you how many hours I invested into his case and phone calls and conversations. But it makes me believe in what we're doing, and if you can change that one person, you know, when somebody thinks you that way, it makes it all worth it. So I encourage everyone to strive for that, whether you're representing people or you're representing the government. What I had wished had happened on the other side, I wish there had been a government attorney being like, what is going on here? Like, this is jacked up. So just keep that in mind, wherever you might find yourself. So yeah, I could talk all day about his case. I'm a big fan of his. He knows that. So, but yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you all very much. One panelist, thank you so much. And I appreciate you staying over. And thank you to all the attendees. I learned a ton tonight. And a very happy Veterans Day. And I say that to not only my brothers and sisters in arms, but to all of our supporters, every single one of you on here. Thank you and happy Veterans Day. It just makes me very proud to see the work you're doing and helping those of us in uniform. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you, both in that role and as a fraternity member. With that, I will close it down. I hope I see you all at the virtual initiation tomorrow. And again, thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.